I have not got my like intro thing going yet. Like, is it a "What's up, everybody"? I feel like that's way too overdone. I don't know. Hey, hi, hello. I'm Tony Bacciagalupo. I've got Jacey here with me, and Jacey and I have known each other for a whole not even a week, 6 days now. Um, and Jacey has an amazing podcast called Recalibrate, which we are going to talk about at some point. But Jacey, uh, I'm so excited to just get on the phone and chat with you a little more. So, how's it going?
Good. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and celebrate our almost 1 week anniversary of being friends.
I know. It's hard to believe. I mean, the time just flies, right? But tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about Recalibrate. Maybe let's start there.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Jacey. I am based in New York City. I am a technology consultant by day, yoga teacher by morning, night, all other times, and a podcast host of Recalibrate, like you mentioned. I started Recalibrate about a year ago, and I really started it out of this desire to kind of normalize the human experience. I felt like after COVID, there was this shift that I was seeing where since so much of what we were seeing of other people's lives were online, it went into that highlight reel territory where you only saw the best of the best and you were kind of missing out on the full spectrum of the human experience. So that led me to feel, really lonely. I was trying to connect or see parts of myself in other people, and I just wasn't finding that on social media. So I really wanted to create a space where I could just have super honest conversations about the things that I was experiencing, ultimately to help people feel less alone in whatever they're experiencing. And then the podcast has grown since then. So now I have a co host as of about a month ago, which is super fun. And yeah, it's been such a cool thing to learn. I started it like without any experience podcasting or kind of just taught myself the ropes of editing and what softwares and connecting with guests. So it's been so much fun. I love doing it.
Amazing. And this is something that you've been doing for a little while now. How many episodes are you up to?
We just posted our 40th episode last week. So I started last September and then I've posted pretty much every week since then, which has been really cool to watch.
Wow. Oh, that's great. And how do you maintain the consistency? Like what is it that keeps you going regularly
Yeah,
with it?
I think people don't realize how much work goes into starting a podcast and maintaining the podcast. Like, I think a lot of people post the first 5 or 6 episodes and then they're like, "Damn, this thing is a lot of work. It takes so much time and effort." Um, so yeah, learning it's like a part-time job. I think what really motivates me to keep going is the connection that I feel from doing it, either with like getting to know myself more deeper, because I feel like you just kind of get into this flow state once you hit record, or getting to know other people and hear their stories more deeply. And then just like hearing the feedback from people that are listening and saying that even if one person just messages me and says, that made me feel so much less alone, or wow, I never heard someone say those thoughts out loud, like that is everything to me, and that's kind of what keeps me going. So it takes a little bit of planning, obviously, and some negotiating around my schedule, but it's ultimately really worth it for me.
So when you mention somebody messaging you saying like, "Oh, that's something that really I connected with," you had said this at the event that we both attended. Shout out to David Nabinski, the amazing David. And you'd said something about like you talk about the things that people are thinking about but not necessarily talking about. Do you have any specific kind of moments where you've had somebody say that there was something you addressed that really spoke to them?
Yeah, I think I at David's event, I gave the tagline like, "I want to be the person that says all the things that you think but have never heard said out loud." And with the podcast, I kind of cover a lot of range of topics. Like I'll talk about mental health or relationships or like body image struggles, like things that are kind of almost deemed as shameful, I guess, in society. And they're starting to become more talked about. But those areas where people don't hear a lot about. You see the accomplishments and the highlights and the promotions and all of the good stuff that happens in people's lives, but maybe you don't really see like the down days or the being in the funk. So I remember I posted this one episode about being in a funk and kind of just what I was experiencing. And I think I'm definitely someone that presents as this very like optimistic, happy person. So hearing people be like, "Oh, yeah, I'm also really in a funk right now. Like I'm just kind of going through it and I can't figure out why I feel stuck." And like just listening to hear you talk about it made me feel comforted and less alone to know like I'm not the only person in the world experiencing this. So that was really cool. I think when I posted that I'm in a funk episode, so many people reached out and I realized a lot of people were also in a weird funky state. So I don't know if there was something going on in the universe, but it was cool to get that community feedback.
I get the impression that there is true funkiness going on. I don't know,
Yeah.
that that seems to be like something is up, and, I'm still working on getting a better handle on how to characterize that. Uh, w so we went through, this pandemic, and do you think, based on what you're hearing or even just what you're observing in yourself, to what extent do you think that that experience that we've all gone through and maybe are still going through in some way is affecting that?
Yeah, I think it's played a huge factor in that. At least for me, the combination of, the shift into mostly remote work and people presenting a lot more on social media and that period of having like that true alone time that kind of put a pause to everyone's super busy lives. Like I know that period of quarantine and isolation was a couple of years ago now, but it still feels like it created this imprint in people's lives that hasn't fully shifted out. Like, I think it created this fundamental change for people. But for me, I think being in a remote work environment for the last 3 years and also seeing social media, it creates this environment where you feel like you're always connected, but you're also never really connected. And I think a lot about these parasocial relationships that you can have with people where you think that you know someone or you think you know everything that's going on with someone's lives, whether that be, your favorite influencer, someone you watch on YouTube or even like your friends that you just don't see often. Um, you see those and you think you know what's going on and you feel connected to them, but then you don't actually have that in-person tangible connection where you know all the depths. Like it's a very one-dimensional
Mm.
relationship.
I was astounded at the extent of this issue of parasocial relationships, the amount of engagement, the amount of money that people are spending to pretend to. I mean, I don't want to necessarily judge or characterize it in a certain way, but to have this relationship that we have this whole new word in the dictionary for this idea of a parasocial relationship. Um, what do you think? Well, what are you observing directly in terms of your own experience, in terms of maybe the way that your lifestyle worked prior to everything going crazy to today? What's different? What's still different?
Yeah. I mean, the remote work environment, like for me, I'm still working remotely and I had probably a bit of a different experience. So I was in college when COVID happened, and then I transitioned like, as we transitioned out of COVID and out of quarantine, I transitioned into, like, real adult working world, but I started everything virtually. I, moved into, like, my first apartment in the middle of COVID. I had all of these, like, first-time experiences that were really impacted by the pandemic, and what hasn't really changed, I know a lot of things have gone back to normal, but I've still been working remotely for the most part since October 2020. So it's been something that at first I loved. Like when I remember when I started working remotely, I was like, this is amazing. I can work in my pajamas and I can
Yeah.
do so much stuff during the day. This is awesome. I love this so much. I would never go in person. And then as it's, kind of transitioned, for the past couple of months, I have developed the sense of being so alone during the day and feeling super isolated and having way too much time alone in my own thoughts. And like sometimes the first person, sometimes I don't talk to a person in real life all day. Like you are the first person I am speaking to today, which is
At
crazy
5
because it's
PM. Yeah.
5 p.m. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is really, I've come to see like taking a toll on my mental health in a lot of ways.
Hmm. How so? Like, what do you notice in yourself?
Yeah, I definitely find myself to be more anxious. I find myself to be having like more symptoms of depression, like things that I didn't really experience before the pandemic. I am definitely experiencing now. I think sometimes when you're alone so often, you get this like inflated sense of self where you kind
Mm.
of are not grounded in the everyday world. Like you're not having those micro interactions with people. You almost like forget the outside world exists for a little bit if you're just like staring at your computer screen all day or you're just in your space and you get into this phase where I don't know, it really takes you out of the overall sense of having community.
Yeah. And do you feel, so what do you think, like, what are you doing about it, or what do you think you could be doing about it?
Yeah.
What
So,
well, I guess, like, what would you want to see change?
definitely.
What would success look like?
Yeah, community is something that I've just found to be so important to me. So it's been like before I had the option of, working in person or having that be changed, like I sought out a lot of other ways to find community because I didn't realize how important it was to me until I didn't have it. So I teach yoga, and that is something that has brought me a huge sense of community, being able to show up to a studio space and be in a room with other human beings that have the same shared interest in meeting people and being able to share energy with people. I do that a couple of times a week. And then recently, last week, I started going into the office again, which is very exciting. And I'm so proud of myself for going in. I know a lot of people have gone in like for the past year, 2 years even, but I think two things like I developed a bit of social anxiety that I didn't have before COVID. And my office is like kind of a WeWorking space, so it's like my team isn't in person. So for a while, I was like, "Oh, what am I really gonna get out of going into the office? Like my team isn't there." And then I kind of forced myself. I was like, "I must get dressed and go into the office." And it was so much better than I expected, even if I just had like those micro interactions with the barista or someone that I'm passing like in the halls. It is so much better than being by myself in my room.
Yeah, I remember the first time I went to a cafe in kind of peak pandemic 2020. We're all masked up, and it felt transgressive to even walk into a place in that moment, and having that little like silly banter with the barista about whatever. And I remember almost crying, just being like, "Oh,
Mm.
barista banter! Like, oh, we need that. We
Barista
need that.
banter. I
Yeah,
love that. Oh my
need that
gosh.
incidental stuff." Okay, so you're going back to the workplace, which is helping. You are teaching yoga, which is amazing, and yoga studios, I feel like people who attend tend to be creatures of habit. They tend to do
Mm.
it very, very regularly. They have their teacher, they have their studio, that kind of thing. Um, what do you see as, like, to what extent does a yoga studio serve as kind of a community hub? Because I think there's some untapped potential there, and I'm curious kind of what your observations have been teaching.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with the creature of habit thing. And people have, their class that they go to every day or certain days of the week, and they have their teacher that they go to, or like just having a space where you can show up consistently and also be around other people that are showing up consistently. So you have that sense of familiarity, and it creates this sense of home in a place that is really big, like New York City. I think the yoga studio has kind of created that space for me where I know every like day or every week at this time I'm showing up at this place and these other people are also showing up and I don't know them, but now I start to develop this familiarity with them, and maybe we start to have little conversations, maybe we start to recognize each other, maybe we start to learn a little bit about each other, and then it gets to this point, a couple of months down the line, like I know about their job or I know weird little things about them, and then I can start asking them like, "Oh, hey, how did that job interview go?" Or, "Oh, well, like I remember you had this thing. How was that vacation?" Like just little things that make people feel really seen. I think that's my biggest thing as a teacher is like I really care about making people feel seen and understood. Like those are my two biggest goals when I teach. I don't really like I care about the sequence, but not really. Like I don't really care about the poses as much. I just want people to feel like they're coming to the space and I remember their name. I remember these little details about them because I know that's made such a difference for me.
Absolutely. I feel like my relationship to yoga changed absolutely to like a complete different level when I encountered a teacher who really made it clear that he wanted you to do what worked for you,
Yeah.
even if it wasn't what he was telling you to do, to like make it yours. And I feel like there was probably a big part of me that was trying to like do it right or, like do exactly what I'm told, even if it didn't feel good in my body. And just once I was like, oh, I could just kind of go slower, or I can drop back into child's pose if I don't feel like doing the thing that he's saying to do in that moment. And then it became mine. It became so much more nourishing. Um, Also, that teacher held a sangha gathering in
Ooh.
the studio, which was amazing because it was the yoga studio's community but in a social environment. So it was explicitly about, hey, let's get together and actually maybe talk to the people that we see regularly. And I feel like it was so amazing because everybody's there with a regular, they're regulars. They have this common interests. They obviously kind of all like live nearby, that kind of thing. And it made me wish that more studios did that. Do you think there's an opportunity for yoga studios to get more maybe assertive in their role as kind of a social hub?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we are really missing this idea of a third space that I talk about a lot. And
Mm,
people have, in back in the day, like people had, their work, they had their home, and then their third space, whether that be, their place of religion or that be like a town center or that be, I don't know, just where are these places. And I think people use yoga studios or, whatever their thing of choice, insert XYZ thing here, as their third space if they go to it consistently. So I think there's absolutely an opportunity for, these places that maybe their function is to provide a service, but they also in doing that could provide this whole other realm of giving people a place to gather and connect.
so just before you and I got on, we discussed the fact that we grew up in the same neighborhood, probably like 2 miles from each other. What was what was the third place for you growing up in our Long Island area?
Yeah, growing up, I was really introverted, so I like, remember on the street, my we always used to joke because of where I lived, there was all these, like, elderly people, there was not a lot of kids on my street, so, like, I fantasized about, going outside and all these kids are playing on the block, and I didn't really have that. I played a lot of
Same.
sports. Yeah, I played a lot of sports growing up, so I think, having team environments and being able to go to practice and try like go to games and go to tournaments, like that was a big part of my childhood, but I feel like maybe the only other third space I had was going to the library. Like my mom and I loved to go to the library, still love to go to the library and bookstores and things like that. So I feel like just between, having that library third space or, that team environment outside of school, those were my two things. And other than that, I was always on the computer. I love computer games. I was on these like little internet threads, like, before
Yes.
Reddit was a thing,
Oh,
like, I remember I was on these online Discord communities, and I always used to do stuff like that, but in real life, those were probably the 2 places.
it was Barnes and Noble for me. for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
Uh,
that was, like, my favorite place growing up. I would just make my mom take me there, and we would sit and read books in the aisles and stuff like that.
we had a family tradition. My dad would take us, myself and my sister, and we would say we'd go for 5 minutes, but we knew that 5 minutes meant an hour. So it was like we would call it Barnes and Noble time
I
because we
love
knew that
that.
no matter what we did, we would always spend more time there than we thought we would.
It has to be a minimum of an hour anytime you
Yeah.
go into Barnes& and Noble. That is just, like it's the best place. I could get lost in there for hours.
But it does feel like for me a big part of what drove me to get so involved in community related stuff, and I built a co-working space and ran it for a long time. A lot of it was driven from this desire to have better third places,
Mm.
and a lot of that desire came from the fact that I really struggled to find those growing up, outside of Barnes and Noble. Like Barnes and Noble is awesome, don't get me wrong, but doesn't always necessarily scratch the itch. Um, did you find that you I don't want to be like asking too much of a leading question, but like, do you
Mm.
feel like you were supported or that you had enough access to those kinds of places and environments?
And growing up, I feel like definitely not. I probably had a similar experience to you where I really didn't have that dedicated 3rd space outside of what we were just talking about. I feel like there was no, I don't know, just like town center, like rec I know like one of my family friends, they had a rec center in their town that a lot of people used to go to, and we didn't really have anything like that. So I feel like there wasn't enough dedicated 3rd spaces where we were growing up.
What would you want to see where you live now that would
Mm.
actually get you out of the house and get you hanging out? I mean, I'm going to answer the question myself, which is like I'm picturing that if David, our friend David, just built like David's place, and it
That would
was
be
like the place
perfect.
you could go hang out with David's people all the time. But sorry. So go ahead. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just so into coffee shop culture. Like I
Mm.
love going to different coffee shops and I love when there's locals at the coffee shop. I love when people are there. There's this place in Brooklyn that I used to go to all the time called Kava Social, and it was this place. It was like a kava bar. I don't know if you've ever had it. It's like this root herb drink that's like supposed to be relaxing or whatever, but it turned into this community spot where people would just co-work there all day. They had like art supplies, they had board games, they had, these people that are working on their businesses or their passion projects. Just like the people that it attracted was amazing. And we would joke like people lived there because they were always there. There was always the same people there. Everyone knew each other. And that type of space was amazing. Like, I loved going there, and I felt like, "Oh, I didn't know where to go. I was done with work. I didn't have plans. I would just go there." And I knew
Mhm.
I would see a friendly face. I knew someone would be there to talk to. So, I think something just like that where, like, where we grew up, there was not even any local coffee shops, or there was just, like, Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts. Like, I really love those local spaces like that where you just know the same people are gonna be there.
It's amazing that because part of my hypothesis that I'm developing with this conversation, with the other things I'm working on, is that the loneliness epidemic is a big, real problem, and it is extremely solvable
Mm.
in the sense that the stuff we're talking about works, and it's not hard, it's not complicated. We don't need a Moderna to invent a new type of vaccine in order to fix loneliness. We just have to kind of like, I don't know, collectively develop the willpower to actually try different things and apply things that we know already work. I went to a cafe, shout out to the Eco Cafe here in Norwalk, Connecticut, where they had a coffee tasting session on Sunday morning. And it was the owner of the cafe and the roaster that he partners with on the beans. And we learned about coffee and we drank way too much coffee together. And we ended up kind of like having really great conversations and brainstorming these fun ideas for things that we could do with the space and with the store. And it was so damn simple. It was like it was a few people getting together and nerding out about a coffee. But yet the coffee shop as that kind of assertive third place community hub. I think that that added element of like giving us a reason to go and actually meet the other people next to us. I feel like that's the twist.
Yeah, putting on events I think is so helpful, or even just, developing these clubs. I used to work at Meta, and they had um the biggest club culture that I have ever seen at a company. Like I remember when I joined, they like, the internal thing looks like Facebook for their employees. And you go on and there's all these groups you can join, and it's like coffee club and book club and yoga club, and they're just like any weird niche thing that you could find, like you can just join. And then they do meetups, or they're like, everyone meet on the fourth floor cafe at 3 p.m. and we're gonna do some coffee thing. Like they just kind of created that community. And
Hmm.
I think you're right. Like sometimes people, it's hard to find that first step. Like maybe the coffee shop itself, just going there is not enough. It's like, what is the event that they can put on, or what is something
Hmm.
that they can curate to bring people into the space and have that shared common purpose, even just to spark that initial thing that you were saying.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's just something simple, and I feel like it's physical spaces, yoga studios, cafes. They exist, and in some cases they have the ability or the inclination to do that, which I think is one area we can play with. And then there's just our everyday humanity, being people who can invite people over to hang out and maybe even watch TV, which is my ultra smooth segue to one of the
I love
things you
it.
and I discussed. I will rate that segue as like a 7 out of 10.
That was pretty good.
JC, tell me about the thing that we discussed last week when we met, about watching TV with friends.
Yeah,
What's the
so
story there?
we were talking. I don't even remember how this came up, but we were just talking about this idea of third spaces, or things that you do in your everyday week to kind of get you out of that hamster wheel, just wake up, work, go to bed, repeat. And something that my friends and I did last year was, one of my friends loves Survivor. He is like the biggest Survivor fan I've ever met. He's a Survivor super fan, loves it so much. I personally don't care about Survivor at all. I've never watched it. I don't have like an inclination really to watch as much TV, but we would always just listen to him talk about it. And one season, he was like, guys, every Wednesday, come over to my apartment and we're going to watch Survivor together. And at first I was like, why would I don't really want to do that. I don't like Survivor and I have to go all the way to the Upper East Side. I wasn't too enthused.
Mm,
But then I was like, all right, I want to see my friends. I'll go for the first time. And I go, and it was amazing. Like I had so much fun, and it really got me out of, my routine of the work week, and it made me like have the space where I could reconnect with my friends in the middle of the week. Like I feel like I was kind of in that, school mindset where I was like, "Oh, it's a school night. I can't do anything on a Wednesday." But then
yeah.
I was like, we met up and we started doing this thing, and every week we became so dedicated, this group of like 10, 11, 12 people who also didn't really like weren't really into Survivor, and then we just showed up every single week, and it became this thing that we did, and we all got so invested in it. And even to the point where like if we couldn't make it, we would zoom into it, like we would watch it together. We became like, this was our thing every Wednesday. And I think having those routines that you do at this time, this place, every single week, even if it's something as so simple as calling a friend at the same time every week, which I know you had mentioned that you did, and or watching a TV show together every week, it does really create this sense of meaning in your week and
Mm.
sense of community.
Yeah, there, and it's so simple, but
Yeah.
we really do love that regularity of, I know I can count on this time of the week, this day of the week, that there's this thing that I can look forward to. Something we can learn from religion, right? Religions
Yeah.
are religious about, like, we do services on these days at these times, and we really get that integrated. Uh, and do you think that your friend was? Do you think they knew what they were doing when they were doing, like? It doesn't seem
I
like it was about Survivor, really.
I don't know, because he's also someone that's very introverted. Like he would be happy to just watch TV by himself, I feel like. But then something prompted him that season to be like, "Hey, it would be cool if we did this thing." And I think innately, like everyone is looking for connection and to have these little moments where they can share an experience with the people that they really love and care about. So I'm sure somewhat somewhere deep down he like had a feeling, but it was so cool what he created and it really did change how I viewed my week. Like people, view Wednesday as a hump day. I did that too with a friend of getting coffee. Like I just used to not like Wednesdays. And instead of, just being like, oh, Wednesday sucks. This is the middle of the week. I was like, okay, how can we change this?
Mm.
Every Wednesday, me and my best friend went to get coffee at this coffee place, and it was, like, the best part of my week, and it was so simple. We literally just showed up every week, 8 AM at this coffee shop. We sat there for an hour, we caught up on our weeks, we, like, had a cup of coffee, and then we went about our day, and that was so meaningful to me.
And again, so simple.
Yeah.
So how did that conversation come about? There was a moment when you or your friend or in a conversation said like, "Hey, Wednesdays stink. Let's do something about it."
Yeah, I think maybe we did it one Wednesday, like, we had just we're like, "Oh, let's catch up. I'm free this time." And we met up, and I was like, "Wow, this completely changed my day." Like, I went about the rest of the day, I was in a good mood, I felt so much happier, my rest of my day just kind of flowed so much more nicely, it was a good pick me up in the middle of the week, and then I reached out to her and I was like, "We should do this every single week." Like, I think, like, humans tend to overcomplicate things. We do these things one time, like, we go get ice cream with a friend, one time, and then it brings us so much happiness, but then we don't do it again, or
Yeah.
we like make a recipe or we do something one time, we're like, "Oh, that was great. I feel good." And then you kind of forget about it and you just like
Yeah.
you don't schedule it into your lives. And I think something that I've tried to be really intentional about is scheduling in these moments of joy. Like I
Mm.
watched this video that was like the brain can easily forget how to be happy and sometimes you just have to like remind it how to get there.
Really well put. It's one of the things that I'm tracking that the some of the solutions to this issue of loneliness, isolation, etc., is about, dare I say, recalibrating your mindset. That we maybe already have a lot of the answers, and maybe we will benefit from practicing recognizing what those answers look like when we find them, and then being okay with saying I want more of this. So
Mm.
you had this conversation with your friend, you noticed that you felt so much better that day, and then what happened?
Yeah, and then we just started doing it every single Wednesday, and it became so ingrained in our routine, and I think so often people think that these big things are gonna bring them happiness, that it's gonna be this vacation or this promotion or whatever, and they just spend all day, every day thinking about these things, and what really has brought me happiness is these little moments of connection and scheduling, like, these little times and really leaning into that and knowing that it doesn't have to be this whole big thing that you do, but it can be something that's really simple and sustainable in a way that, microdoses these moments of joy throughout your everyday life instead of just waiting, the whole year for the 1 week that you go on vacation or something like that. Like, you can just figure out how to intertwine these little moments of joy and connection and happiness into your everyday life or into your week.
Love that. Love that. Love this is what I'm looking for, is those simple easy things that the barrier is just really really low, because I feel like, okay, we're busy, we maybe have a little resistance to leaving the house, those kinds of things,
Mhm.
but it's not necessarily asking too much to just say, "Hey, is there somebody that you could have a Wednesday coffee with?" Do it once. If it works out, if you're feeling good about it, keep doing it. And also, really speaking to the larger thing that I find really interesting here is learning to listen to yourself, listen to your body, to your how you respond to things, and try to catch those moments of, wow, that actually made me feel really good. What if I just did more? You
Mhm.
know?
Yeah.
And that could be a coffee, it could be a hike, it could be just going for a walk around the block, whatever that is.
Yeah, I think people just think that life has to be really hard and they have to just do more and work more and like go, 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 go. And that either they don't deserve these moments of happiness, they have no energy for these moments. And it is so hard at first, and I've definitely been there. Like, I used to preach this stuff all the time, and then I kinda got rocked by, like, this period of depression, and I understand now, like, how people can listen to this and be like, "I don't have the energy to do those things." But sometimes you just have to force it in the tiniest way because it creates this endless feedback loop. Like, it gives you back energy. Even if you don't have the energy, if you do these little moments or you try these little things or you take these little steps, you will start to not maybe not immediately, maybe not right away, but you will start to build that momentum that kind of does give you the energy back and does create like this forward momentum in your life. But I've been there. It's really difficult sometimes to convince yourself that it's going to, make you feel better.
Yeah, I feel like it's certainly healthy to not force something, if you're really not up for it, great, but to maybe be a little, give yourself a little nudge, right? To
Yeah,
say,
you got to a little
uh,
bit.
yeah, and that might be as simple as saying, there's one cafe that I really liked to go hang out in. There's one friend that I'd really love to catch up with. You could probably build on a natural motivation that you can draw from. So I
Yeah.
like that. All right, so I want to change tacks a little bit here because I'm very curious about something else that I just want to learn more about, which
Mm,
is the role of family history, tradition, culture, those kinds of things. I think that a big part of how we form our identities, how we form a sense of belonging, is tied to our families, our history, traditions that we grew up with, things like that. Is there anything that comes to mind when I mention that is perhaps valuable or important to you in terms of how you grew up, a traditional kind of activity or thing that you did growing up that you find to be valuable?
mm. Yeah, I was thinking about this. I am an only child, so I don't have any siblings, and I was really close to, like, my mom and dad, and I feel like we had this little family unit thing going on, and I was, like, kinda reflecting on traditions, and we, like, didn't have any crazy, like, every single year at this time we do this thing or something like that, but it was definitely just, like, the little moments that happened on a weekly basis that I think became my traditions or things that I looked forward to. Like, I was thinking every weekend, my dad wakes up super early. My dad wakes up super early every day, but every weekend I would wake up and my mom would still be asleep and I knew my dad was downstairs watching a movie, eating breakfast. And I
Ah,
would get so excited to just go downstairs and like have this comfort in, like making my breakfast and sitting down and watching like whatever movie with him on a Saturday morning. And that was kind of my tradition with him and like our little thing. And similarly, like at night, like my mom always reads before bed and we would like read together growing up. And I would always just like crawl into bed and we would read and that would be like our time. So I feel like we didn't have these like big overarching traditions, but we had these little like weekly traditions that I just like grew to find a lot of comfort in growing up.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, it speaks to just the simplicity of having something you can count on, a way to be connected in a way that's just very natural and casual and normal and regular, which I think is every bit as special as something more, overt. So
Mhm.
that's awesome. Do you
Yeah.
know? So this completely random question. Do
Tell
you know
me.
if you do you know I just happen to be extremely curious about this right now. Do you know if any families up your tree have a family crest?
Mm. I don't know. That's a really good question.
I did not set you up to be able to answer this question at all. So it's entirely just curiosity on my part. Because my family, the Bacigalupos, have a family crest. I've seen it. I have no idea what the heck it means. I'm dying to know. But I recently talked to one of my dear friends who herself, her family has a crest and has this like whole storied history, and I just find it very interesting that whether consciously or unconsciously, we inherit from previous generations
Mm.
certain worldviews, certain cultures, certain ways of looking at the world. Have you noticed anything maybe as you've kind of, grown into adulthood and come out into the world, that there's a way of seeing the world or way of interacting with people that you bring based on the way that you grew up that maybe is different from the way that other people see things?
Hmm. That's a really good question. I think my parents just like instilled this like work ethic or this like sense of humbleness within me that I think is more unique, that I just like watched them work really hard and never ask for anything in return. And I
Mm,
think a lot of people, you know, like are very outward presenting, and my parents just always had these like really strong values of, like being in this sense where they would just work hard and be a good person and not really like look for any show and tell of it. Like they both really don't, post on social media or like tell a lot of people about their accomplishments. Like I feel like they kind of just stay to themselves and like let things unfold. So I didn't really realize that wasn't the norm until I grew up, and then looking at how other people kind of present versus how my family presents things, I think it's a really interesting thing that I'm really grateful for.
that's beautiful. And just turning to some of the things that we like to just touch on in general here. Anything recent you've been reading that has just been rocking your world that you want to tell everybody about?
Hmm. I've actually been reading the Yoga Sutras recently, which is something that is very interesting. I have it right here. Goes a lot into just like yogic philosophy and history of yoga. And I think, I mean, it's like something I'm obviously interested in, but it's like all of the ancient philosophical texts about, written in Sanskrit. And I think since it's written in Sanskrit, a lot of people kind of pass over it, but I got one of them that's like translated into kind of language that we can understand. And it is really interesting. I think teaching, you can kind of get away from like what the base foundational principles are. You're like, okay, I do this thing, and people view it as like a workout or something, especially in like some of the modern yoga ways. But this is like really bringing it back to, the foundational elements of it, and it's been really grounding for me, and like really it gives me a lot to think about. It's very thought provoking.
Love it. Absolutely love it. And what about recipes? We like to talk
Mm.
food. Do you have a favorite recipe you'd like to share with us?
Yes, I have two, and they're kind of the same in different forms. I love breakfast foods, and I love all things like banana peanut butter esque. So, two favorite things. I love pancakes. I am a pancakes for dinner type person. I have a pancake recipe that I found that's like these banana pancakes that I make all the time. And also chocolate chip banana bread. Those are like my two staple comfort foods. So I can share the recipe with you, but that's bringing me joy in the food world recently.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. Have you made those for other folks in any kind of like a social situation
Oh,
before?
yes. Yeah, I banana bread is like my go-to meal that I will bring to people in times of distress, that I will make for myself in times of distress. So, like I remember recently I had made my best friend was having like such a horrible day, and I just made banana bread and like ran it over to her apartment, and it was like such a moment of joy that I love to share with people.
That's so beautiful. I love that. I feel like we as a species really bond over breaking bread together
Yeah.
and making food and sharing it with each other. So that's a beautiful thing. JC, I know that you have been raised with a strong ethic of working hard, but not overly calling attention to yourself. But we have reached that portion of the program where maybe you could tell us where we can find you, we can find what you're working on.
Yeah, of course. So my podcast is the Recalibrate podcast, like we've mentioned. You can find it on any podcast platform, Apple, Spotify, and we have an Instagram at recalibrate.podcast where we post all episode things. We interact with listeners and things of that nature. So we're always open there. If people want to message and chat with us, that is where you can find me.
Absolutely amazing. JC, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I'm looking forward to next time we can get together at a David hangout or maybe go hang out at your cafe next time there's something going on over there. And thanks so much for taking the time to come hang with me.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This is so fun.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, JC.
Bye.